and welcome to another episode of EMA Cloud Rants. Today it's all about containers in real life. Andrew, they are much more dangerous than they seem when your developer shows them to you on a laptop and says, look, this thing will just run everywhere on your servers. But that's not entirely true. There's a lot more complexity to it. There's a lot more traditional IT to it. It may not be cool, but it's there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're very powerful technology, but there's a bit of maturation required to kind of surround it with all the pieces that you really need to put into production. Even just getting the data of what they're doing can be difficult. So we're doing a lot of R&D around Prometheus and C-Advisor and making sure that we can actually model what the containers are doing and the workload patterns so we can optimize them. Because if you try and deploy production apps in them right now, you're kind of flying blind, and we see customers actually wrapping them inside VMs so they can leverage the maturity of the VM environment for operational purposes. So yeah, we're getting there. There's just a little more work to be done to round it in.
Yeah, it's different tools for monitoring, for management, for securing containers. It's a different way of thinking. Containers are much more short-lived. And you don't usually, as an enterprise, have the skills, right? You have people who go to classes, who learn, they go to the shows, but it's a different animal. It's not such a simple animal.
No, it's very simple to those that really understand them well. We all know those experts that are really getting their hands dirty with containers. And then to really go into production and be operated effectively, it has to be kind of intuitive to everybody else as well. And so, I mean, part of that is the processes around how they're deployed, and part of that is how you manage and operate them, which doesn't necessarily look like a virtual environment. It requires new tools, analytics to understand and make sure that they are all being hosted and placed in the right, scheduled the right way. And so there's kind of a different mindset around these things than there is for a virtual environment.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what I care about and what my boss cares about is two things: risk and cost, right? And I want to manage risk and cost in the same way as I currently manage them when I run on vSphere or on AWS without containers, right? And that just becomes more difficult, even if I have a lot of expertise in my organization, right? There is the operations guys, there's the developers, they all have their own agendas. You need to bring them together, and you need to enforce compliance, right? You won't get a pass on your next audit because you said, now I have containers.
Yep. I think there's a bit of misconception sometimes when people adopt them. They think the world is going to be simpler, and the reason why is because they think they're a Google. And what I mean by that is that there are certain organizations where the workloads are all grains of sand. They're all short-lived jobs that execute, and scheduling them is like putting sand in jars. And that's the way most container schedulers work. And it seems very simple, but when in practice, most organizations we talk to, their workloads aren't all grains of sand. They have all kinds of different workloads. Some of them run all day long. Some of them have different shapes and sizes. They're not just little microservices. So if you're 100% microservices, great. That's one thing. But if you're not, which is almost everybody, it's a little more complex. And it's the way we view it. It's kind of like putting stones in jars versus sand in jars. And it's actually putting both in there together and trying to optimize that. And so if you don't get that right, you'll make a bit of a mess, because you're going to stand up a container environment and start running your workloads in it and wonder why it's not working like Google. It's because you're not Google. That's the reason why.
And it's really, we are forcing, because we don't usually have the microservices-based application, we are forcing traditional applications in there. So we have to build all those workarounds, like those drivers for storage volumes, right, that map permanent storage to containers. Containers are supposed to be stateless. So there's a lot of other examples where you need custom integrations for containers to get this traditional enterprise application to run, or you upgrade your application, but part of it is still a legacy monolithic application. And there's a lot of interesting complexities to it that become even more when you think about hybrid cloud, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't just want to get your feet wet on ECS and run everything there. At the end of the day, you'll have to have workloads that will go in your data center most likely, or somewhere with more compliance, more security, more granularity and management. For most organizations, that's true, and that makes things even more complex, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have a lot of constraints in your environment, compliance constraints or even security constraints, a lot of these things don't magically go away just because you're running in the cloud or because you're running on containers. And so we see challenges in, once I'm running in a container service in the cloud, that you still need to have a level of control over what's happening. Everything from containing software licenses to making sure certain things don't touch other things. again, so I think the trick is understand what constraints do go away when you move to this new operational model and which ones don't. And in practice, a lot of them don't, and you need to have an effective strategy to deal with them. And so, from our view, we look at the analytics as a means to say, well, we're going to look at all of the constraints and all of the opportunities and kind of figure it out for you very simply, so that you can run in production efficiently and safely in these new technologies, and not have it be a continuous science project where somebody really smart has to be looking at it all the time and figuring out what to do.
It is basically a new language that you have to learn. You still have your same requirements, performance, compliance, security, cost. Those are all the same, but you translate them in a new, more granular, more dynamic, quicker changing language, right? So you need more analytics, which is good for you guys at Densify. Thank you very much, Andrew. And this was another episode of EMA Cloud Rants.
Thanks.